There is a shadow event upcoming in Pokemon Go, and it looks to be one of the best shadow events they've ever released. My name is HomesliceHenry, and today I'm going to be talking about the new shadow Pokemon that we can expect in the world of Pokemon Go. Spoiler alert, as you can see on screen, Shadow Giratina is one of them. We're going to be talking about the new shadows that are going to arrive, when we can expect them to arrive, and then doing an analysis, seeing how good are these new shadow Pokemon. So first, let's go through the news, and then let's get to the analysis. This event is going to begin Monday, August 11th at midnight, and it runs for a full week. So that is really nice. That means that hopefully people who want to play this event will have at least one day off where they can potentially have a little bit of free time to go out there and grind some of these new shadows. As during every Team Rocket event, there are way more Team Go Rocket stops. The balloons happen more frequently as well, so there's a greater opportunity to get these new Pokemon, and you can TM away frustration. Now, this event takes place a few days before the World Championships begin. The World Championships begin on Friday, so if you're a Worlds competitor and there's something you want to use on your team, but it has frustration, you will be able to TM off before the Worlds event begins. And it looks like there's going to be Shiny Salandit. Cool. I'm not really a Shiny collector, but that's new for this event as well. Now, if you defeat Giovanni during this event, you'll get Shadow Giratina. Shadow Giratina Altered, I think it has potential. It has really, really nice stats. Obviously, we're going to be going into this more a bit later in the video, but it has really good stats. And across the board, it has some pretty okay moves. At the very least, Shadow Claw, Dragon Breath, and Dragon Claw are good. Basically, all of its other charge moves are bad in their own way, but just having a viable bait move and two viable fast moves mean it's probably going to at least be decent. Shadow Kyogre is going to be in raids. That's obviously been out for a while. And the new shadow Pokemon, this is what I care about. Shadow Talonflame. Incredible. Very excited about that. We have Shadow Charjabug, Shadow Toucannon, which is one that we can ignore, and we have Shadow Starmie. Now, Talonflame, I'm expecting to be kind of the crown jewel out of this group of Pokemon. Giratina should also be solid, but Talonflame is what has me the most excited. After that, Charjabug should be solid. I do think Starmie is fun anti-meta. It had a season where it was really good, but I think it's a bit difficult to use now. Obviously, this is me before I've done any analysis, so why don't I quit yapping? That's basically all the information that we need from here, and let's get to the analysis. The first Pokemon we'll be taking a look at is Shadow Giratina Altered. This is the first time Shadow Giratina has ever been released, and when you encounter it from Giovanni, it is going to be Great League eligible. So let's take a look at what it can do against the Great League meta. Now, this Pokemon has really, really good Great League stats. Obviously, it is going to be Shadow, but it's somewhat comparable to a Shadow Cradily in terms of bulk. Obviously, it's going to be Shadow, so it's going to have more in the attack stat, less in the defense stat than normal, but overall pretty comparable to a Shadow Cradily as far as bulk goes. Now, let's take a look at its matchups. Personally, I think people are probably going to opt for the Dragon Breath variant. The Dragon Breath variant can pick up some absolutely absurd wins, but let's take a look at the meta and the zeros. We're obviously the Shadow Giratina Altered, and let's just sim it. Let's see what we're working with here. Right off the bat, a pretty solid Zero Shield performance. Usually, Dragon Breath users are not their strongest in the zeros, but to still gain 45% of the wins, that's pretty nice. Obviously, there's going to be some matchups where it's going to struggle quite significantly. That's going to be a lot of the fairies, anything that does have a resistance to Dragon Breath. As we see in the zeros, it's able to make Furret very, very close. Air Slash Mandibuzz, it is barely losing to. Clodsire, a very close matchup. It's almost beating Aerial Ace Jumpluff. Yeah, right away, across the board here, it's tying with Shadow Scizor. It is beating Ice Beam Lapras, Gastrodon, Diggersby, Drapion, Shadow Marowak. These are some crazy, crazy wins in the Zero Shield. Wow. Right off the bat, obviously it's going to have its matchups where it's going to struggle. It's really not going to like a lot of these fairy types, but my goodness, some of these Zero Shield wins are incredibly, incredibly important. My goodness. So already off to a really nice start in the zeros. Let's take a look at the ones. For the ones, we're now over 50% in terms of win rate, so the win rate jumps. from like 45% to 54%. Again, as we take a look at the losses, the fairy types, it's not really ever going to gain a lot of traction against. In the ones, it looks like Shadow Scizor can actually take home the win. The losses are a bit to be expected here. Even against Acrobatic Shadow Jumpluff, it's still getting the Jumpluff below 20% HP. It is somehow getting a Azumarill with... We're still on Dragon Breath, right? We are still on Dragon Breath. A Dragon Breath user in the ones is getting a Azumarill to like 15% HP. That is crazy. It's almost beating Furret. Galarian Moltres is barely beating it. It is beating Dusclops. It beats Air Slash Mandibuzz. It is beating Forretress. Beating Credilli. These are some really convincing meta wins. I am very excited for this Pokemon. I'm very excited for this Pokemon. So far, from everything that I'm seeing, this looks to be very strong, and that's with Shadow Sneak, which is a terrible move. Shadow Sneak, as we pull it up here, yeah, it's a very bad move. But let's take a look at the twos, and this is where things get scary. 63% win rate in the twos. It's obviously not going to like these fairy types. It's going to struggle here quite a bit. But some of these wins get a little nuts. It is beating Shadow Sableye in the twos just by Dragon Breathing it down. It's beating Feraligatr. It's beating Energy Ball, Aerial Ace, regular Jumpluff. With the Lapras, I'm curious, is it also beating... It's beating Ice Beam Lapras just because it outpaces it. Oh my goodness, that's a disgusting win. Wow. It is just beating Diggersby. Obviously, quick attacks are double resisted, but it's still a nice meta win to get. This looks scary. Oh my goodness. It destroys Clodsire because it just outpaces and Claude can never land an Earthquake. This looks really good. I'm very excited for this Pokemon. And I was double checking. We do have the Shadow ticked on. And this is simming with 4-14-14. So overall, pretty good IVs on the Giratina. That's just what the default was listed. Obviously, IVs are going to vary, but off the bat, that looks to be a pretty strong Pokemon. I do want to take a look at the Shadow Claw Giratina as well, just to see what it can do. I assume it's going to sim worse, but I think it could also have some nice merit. Shadow Claw looking a lot worse in the zeros. You are picking up matchups, like you are beating Shadow Scizor in the zeros, but without the fast move pressure, Primeape can actually emerge victorious. So there's still some good wins, but obviously now there's a lot more losses, whereas something like a Lapras, suddenly a lot more okay now that it's not getting shredded by Shadow Dragon Breath. Let's take a look at the ones. In the ones, the win rate improves. It's still negative 45%. The Lapras matchup is still pretty poor. As we scroll up here, it is beating a Azumarill in the ones. My goodness. That's a pretty cool win. Obviously, I know you're resisting Bubble and they can only hit for super effective damage with Play Rough, but Azumarill's a very bulky mon. So that is a pretty cool get. If we pull this up, how much does a Play Rough do? 60.8%. So it tanks a Play Rough very comfortably. It's never going to be farmed down, and that's part of why that ends up being a one-shield win. Let's take a look at the twos. In the twos, we are looking at a 54% win rate. So across the board, definitely improving the more shields that are in play. Obviously, it is going to have its very negative matchups here across the board. Dedenne, it can almost beat in the twos, and I assume this is with Dedenne correctly baiting. Yeah, it is with Dedenne correctly baiting. If Dedenne if Dedenne tries to go straight Play Rough, or if a Parabolic is called, Giratina can win it. Obviously, that's not a consistent win for Giratina, but Dedenne, in order to win it, has to have Parabolic Charge base shielded. Drapion, as a Shadow Claw user, almost beating it is pretty cool. And it looks like a lot of... You are losing to the Shadow Marowak, which is very unfortunate. Win against Dusclops. Again, win against Azumarill, Gastrodon. You are, again, just beating the Shadow Scizor, which is very nice. Wow. I think this is one of the more exciting Shadow releases we've had in a bit. I was not expecting to be as excited about this Pokemon as I am after looking at it, but I have a radar or two saved. Like, I haven't completed some of the researches. I think I might cast them in here to try and get a good IV Great League Shadow Giratina altered. Because my goodness, this thing looks quite strong. The next Pokemon we'll be taking a look at is Shadow Talonflame. The shadows in this rotation are really cool. I'm very excited for it. Shadow Talonflame. We obviously know Talonflame stats. I'll be taking a look at these shadows from a Great League perspective, just because that's the competitive format and that's the format that most people play. I'm going to be initially simming with Fly Brave Bird. We saw with the Shadow Jumpluff preferring acrobatics. I think that Shadow Talonflame will probably prefer Brave Bird, because Brave Bird, even in its bad matchup, should be able to just be an absolute delete button for just about anything in the game. Let's take a look at the zeros, and wow, the zeros look really nice for Talonflame. There's a 56% win rate. Obviously, if it's getting outpaced by certain Pokemon, it is going to get a little bit tricky. There is one uneven shielding scenario that I want to show, and this is one that I was told about. Shadow Talonflame in the 1-0s has a 97.8% win rate. The only thing it's losing to is Stunfisk. Obviously, Pokemon like Bastiodon and Carbink are not listed here, but it would be Stunfisk, Carbink, and Bastiodon, basically. If we put it to all Pokemon, not just the meta, that's a truly staggering win rate. So I think Shadow Talonflame immediately on day one will probably be an incredibly effective endgame sweeper, because if you're up a shield, you just beat everything, except for Unova Stunfisk. And that's an incredibly powerful Pokemon to have for an endgame scenario. In the ones, 52%, so we're still batting positive, which is really nice. Again, the waters are going to give it quite a lot of trouble, but it's picking up some nice wins here across the board. The wins are more so what I would expect from a Talonflame, whereas Giratina ended up being surprised by some of the wins. These wins make quite a bit of sense in the evens. In the 2s, again, 56%. So it's batting quite positive in the 0s and 2s, slightly positive in the 1s. The wins, not too surprising. One thing that I do want to look at, because it's Shadow, is particularly Flame Charge. Flame Charge in the 2s, interesting. It actually doesn't improve the win rate in a meaningful way compared to the Incinerate, Fly, Brave Bird variant. That's something that I wanted to check, because obviously Flame Charge boosts up Incinerates if you're already Shadowed to begin with. Maybe that can have a bit of an avalanche effect in terms of rolling through a team, but it looks like that you actually don't end up gaining a massive advantage there. So Flame Charge, definitely an option on it. I think I'll probably first try it out with Fly and Brave Bird, but overall looks to be a pretty strong Pokemon. I would argue it's probably a side grade to maybe an improvement over the regular Talonflame, but right off the bat, we've looked at 2 shadows, and these are 2 shadows that I think are going to be pretty solid. I don't think that Shadow Talonflame or Shadow Giratina, I'm not expecting them to be like the best Pokemon, but they should both be very usable. So off the bat, I will absolutely take 2 usable new Shadow Pokemon. Let's take a look at the next up-and-coming Shadow Pokemon, and that is Shadow Charjabug. Charjabug, one of its big issues is the fact that in negative matchups, it just doesn't really have a lot of damage output. X-Scissor is a pretty okay move, but Discharge is an absolutely atrociously terrible move. Discharge is a completely garbage move. It has to be garbage because of how strong Unova Stunfisk would be if it wasn't, but I'm very intrigued to see. I'm not expecting Shadow Charjabug to be even a meta contender, whereas I think that potentially Shadow Talonflame, Shadow Giratina could potentially be strong anti-meta to potentially low meta picks. I'm expecting Charjabug to remain as anti-meta at best, but I think that being Shadow will help it. So let's take a look at the Shadow in the 0s. 46% win rate. So pretty solid. Obviously, there's going to be the matchups where it gets completely shut down, like Clodsire. Not going to be a particularly fun time, but I do think overall it's playing the Dedenne matchup very close. The Typhlosion matchup very close as well. The Volt Switches plus Discharge nearly knock it out. It's now able to beat regular and Shadow Jumpluff. So, it actually picks up a win in the 0s against Dunsparce. Dunsparce is not particularly good. And then there's just a lot of things that are just weak to electric. So those wins, for the most part, make quite a bit of sense. Let's take a look at the 1s. 43%. Again, the Diggersbys of the world, you're going to really struggle against. Gligar, going to be very, very difficult. I think probably the zeros or the 1-0s is going to be where Charjabug really wants to be, or potentially being able to like land a move and farm down, which it can't currently do due to its very low damage output. So the win rates don't look amazing on it, but I think if you're going to use Charjabug, I think there is definitely at the very least a reason to use the Shadow over the regular, and I don't really think there's a reason to use the regular currently. So as we take a look at the 1-0s, we're looking at an 89% win rate. So obviously very, very good. Let's take a look at the regular. And this is one thing where I think the Shadow is strictly better. The Shadow up a shield. Obviously a 78% win rate is amazing up a shield, but if you're the Shadow, you have that little bit of extra damage output that can allow you to up a shield, beat something like a Gastrodon, a Marowak, that you just don't have the ability to beat as the regular. Because as we look here, suddenly, where is Gastrodon? Gastrodon is suddenly a win because you're in the 1-0s. Marowak is gone off the loss list as well, so Marowak turns into a win too. So I do think that Charjabug will probably remain anti-meta at best, but I think the Shadow definitely helps it. I do want to take a look at Bug Bite, just because Bug Bite is a move that it can learn. In the zeros, 50% win rate, pretty solid. Obviously, being a bug, anything that resists bug, it's going to have a pretty terrible day against. It is barely able to pull out a win against Dusclops, which is pretty surprising there. So I think Bug Bite, at least in the zeros, looks kind of interesting. I am on the Shadow still, that's good. And for the 1s, this is where the slow pacing kind of falls apart. 30% win rate in the 1s. The zeros looked really nice, but the 1s are looking miserable. And in the 2s, 39%. So I think Shadow Charjabug, it's definitely a distant third compared to those first two, but I'm still very excited for this Shadow rotation. The final Pokemon we'll be deep diving about is going to be Shadow Starmie. Starmie's stats are not the greatest. 1700 stat product, 133 attack, so it can pack a serious punch, and it has a pretty nice moveset, Psywave, Surf, and Power Gem. I think it really love a slightly cheaper charge move, because Surf, even with Psywave having really good energy generation, can feel just a little bit slow at times, as it is more than 10 turn pacing. But let's equip the Shadow modifier, and let's see what Shadow Starmie can do. The zeros, not looking great for our good friend Starmie, only a 30% win rate across the board. Starmie has a lot of really, really bad losses as well. Like, it's not even getting to a charge move in a lot of these matchups, so it's losing very severely, whereas in most of the other ones, even though they had losses, the worst loss was like a 250 rating, which means it still at the very least gets through half the opponent's HP. This isn't even getting to a charge move, so that's a lot of really unfortunate losses. It is losing to Clodsire in the zeros. That's tragic. Diggersby, it is barely beating it. Let's take a look at the 1s. So for Shadow Starmie, the 1s, unfortunately, it does get worse. 26% win rate. I can scroll through the wins, but it would just primarily be losses. And in the 2 shield here, 28%. So again, Shadow Starmie, I don't think is going to be anything outside of a fun spice pick that you'll probably see in a Callum on Toast video at some point. But overall, if we think back to the other Shadow Pokemon that are being released, I think there's 2 incredibly, incredibly good Pokemon. There's one Pokemon that should be a nice improvement over what it currently is, and then 2 others, Starmie and Toucannon, that are more of filler Pokemon. But I think this is one of the better Shadow rotations we've had in quite some time. There's plenty of things to grind for in this event, and I'm definitely going to be hitting these Shadows hard to see if I can get good versions of all of them to try and test them out for content. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Home Slice Henry. This is More Slice Henry, my second channel, where I cover content primarily related to the Pokemon Go Championship Series, educational content, and in general, just any content that I feel doesn't fit on my main channel. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next video.